Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone to our third SEL webinar. This one is titled The Frameworks in Action. I am Dr. Alicia Nance, and we will have introductions in a few moments. But first, we wanted to share a little bit of information about this webinar and the series. First, most importantly, there is Spanish language interpretation available. Thanks to Elizabeth Roman. So if you would like to have Spanish language interpretation, there should be a button at the bottom of the screen to allow you to choose which language you would like to hear your audio in. Please remember, even if you are sharing and contributing, to speak slowly and in short phrases to support interpretation. We are recording this and we'll share the recording just like we did with the first two, and would love for folks to feel free to use the chat and other things. We will go over that in a few minutes, but just remember this is a very much an informal space where you all can participate as much as you would like. Slide. So this, as with all of our webinars, is made possible through a collaboration between New Mexico PED and Transforming Education. Really, these three webinars are focused on unpacking components of the SEL framework and the Recovery Toolkit, really exploring practical strategies to support implementation of the framework, to learn from our featured speakers, which this tonight is a powerhouse of featured speakers that we will introduce in a moment, and to talk about promising practices, but also challenges and potential solutions to SEL-related work, and to hear more about culturally responsive whole child, whole adult technical assistance that Transforming Education does provide. We also, most importantly, want to provide an opportunity for you all to connect, collaborate, and build and strengthen networks. We will be providing a space later where there will be breakout sessions so you all can build and get to know one another as well. So first and foremost, we would love for you all to put in the chat one word that comes to mind when you think about the young people in your life. That could be at work, at home, within your communities. We'd love to hear one word that comes to mind as we start off this session. Oh yeah, resilient, absolutely. Hilarious, inspiring, ooh, energetic. Thanks, Bernadine. Love, creative, loving, open, absolutely. All wonderful words that we would like to hear. Thank you all so much for sharing. Yes, they're teachers and they're worthy, absolutely. Slide. Thank y'all for sharing those words. We want you all to remember those words as we dive into an amazing counter narrative about proving what is possible within New Mexico. It's really important for us to be hyper-local, and we want to focus on that. So today is going to be all about that. And as you settle in, we want to remind you of a few things. One, everything that we talk about in this session is available in our participant agenda, and that will be in the chat in just a second. Please, please, please remember to take care of your needs, listen to your body, your spirits. As you all are listening to this, feel free to be on camera, off camera, do what you need, get up, stretch, drink water. When we do go into a breakout room, please let Zoom bring you back. So it'll say that the room is over. You'll have another 60 seconds. Please continue to talk until Zoom brings you back to the whole group. Feel free to connect with us visually. We love to see faces as much as possible. Use the chat and reaction features to engage and share. And please feel free to raise your hand for the opportunity to share, because we definitely want to hear from you. Dr. Max.
Thanks, Dr. Alicia. Like in all the other sessions, we really care about how useful this webinar and all the different resources are for you. We spend a lot of time thinking about your feedback with partners in New Mexico and figuring out how to use that information to best support you all. So we're sharing the link in the chat now. And if you have to leave early, please take it and provide feedback so that we can make these sessions as useful as possible for you all.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Max. I am Dr. Kennedy, and I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our guest speaker today, Mercedes Holtree. And Mercedes is a poet, she's a writer, a mentor, and Chicana feminist who focuses on bringing out her roots, experiences, and lessons learned through her poetry in hopes that they embrace her people and other artists around her. She has represented ABQ Albuquerque on multiple final and semifinal stages for national poetry events. She is a Brave New Voices finalist in 2013. She's a two-time finalist at the Women of World Poetry Slam in 2015 and 2018. She's a national group peace champion in 2016. And she's the winner of Modesto's Ill List Slam in California 2017. She's also a featured poet in Mexico City's Diverso, a international poetry festival embracing Mexican voices through poetry. And she holds multiple Albuquerque Slam championships. She's worked with youth in poetry workshops in multiple cities around the country, including Aspen Words, Poetry in the Schools project since 2015. Mercedes is not only a poet, but she's also an outreach coordinator for Warehouse 508, Albuquerque's Arts and Entertainment Center, in which she organizes workshops and poetry events for the youth to participate in. And since graduating from the University of New Mexico with her degrees in Chicano Studies and Journalism and Communication, she continues to cultivate the Poetry Slam community in Albuquerque. She's co-founded and spearheaded, Baroque Revolt, I hope I said that right, which is an international poetry slam organization that creates safe spaces for all to enjoy. I'm so excited to have Mercedes here with us today. She's passionate about spoken word and aspires to continually learn all she can through her art, through working, slamming, and organizing for her community. You may remember that in the first two webinars, we watched Mercedes perform My Blood is Beautiful and also Something Out of Nothing. And so we are really excited to have her join us in person for a special performance today. So welcome, Mercedes.
Oh. Hi, everybody. How's it going? That was a long bio. Thanks for reading the entire thing. The nonprofit I have spearheaded is Burke Revolt, just in case you're looking for the name of it. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here today. I'm really thankful that Dr. Kennedy found me and invited me to read poems virtually in person, I guess, not like, you don't just play my videos on YouTube, but you get to see me and interact with me. So I'm very grateful to be in this Zoom room right now. I'm going to read a poem from my book. It's called I Bloomed a Resistance from My Mouth. And it's titled A+ Poem. And here it goes. I'm just going to go for it. So, the first time I was ever required to write poetry for school credit, I received an F. F for failure, failed to follow rules, to write inside the lines, to line up my poem perfectly, to rhyme rhetoric like it's rehearsed itself on my paper, performed a perfect pirouette. But my words prefer to break like b-boys, to beatbox. My words felt a little more hip hop, and Miss Rice didn't find it suitable that for an English class, I wrote poems that set my soul free, words freestyling to the beat. She didn't want to hear poems that sounded more like corridos, more like Spanish fiction, like barrio diction, like storytelling, like it didn't matter if my poems sang ballads in fire, spoke the language of rushing rivers, breathed The bosque into motion like dragon's breath, cried like weeping woman, Llorona, frightened the children into believing there is so much power that lies within a voice. My voice rises like a phoenix, sets the planets on fire, breaks the light into 1,000 stars, bleeds through any fabric, challenges the depths of the sea, channels the inner goddess in me, embraces divinity, faces adversity. My poems don't paint Mona Lisa's smile, instead they spray Frida Kahlo's eyebrows onto brick walls. My poems light a candle and ask La Virgen de Guadalupe to make it better. I wrap myself into the full moon so that the wolves will howl to me, sing to me. My poems are a warrior cry, a battle song, a dancing tongue with 2 left feet. My poems are the indigo in my blood. It's what makes me a child of the desert, daughter of the mountains, sister of the sunset. We share secrets and braid the colors of her hair into the sky. My poems speak about how the cottonwood and the oak battle to see whose roots are deeper seeped into the ground. My poems are the roots of forbidden fruit, the lips of Eve and the sweet, sinful juice that falls from them. My poems are the poison and the potions. My poems are potent and they only wish to speak the truth. Some would say my words feel foreign, feel forbidden, feel like failure in a classroom, a big fat F written in red, etched across the poem about my childhood, and the poem about my upbringing, and the poem about my grandmother's tamales, and the dinosaur TV in my living room, and the dirty pair of shoes I threw over the telephone wire, and my first fist fight, and the first time I got butterflies, and the last time I swore I'd let my heart break, and the day I was no longer afraid of bleeding, of being woman and monster at the same time, because A+ poems don't set themselves on fire, don't explode like tick, 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 ticking time bombs. A+ poems sound more like dead white guys, sound like proper English, sound like similes sitting in a classroom. A+ poems don't mention your uncle's heroin addiction or your grandmother's beating heart, how the doctors say it's close to giving up, how mama can't afford her mortgage, how you haven't seen your father in weeks. There's no pain in A+ poems, no resolution, no cathartic release, no answers and no questions, and no questioning government, and no questioning God, and no praying to God, and no prayers, just lines of poems that line themselves up like soldiers go in marching one by one. She gave me an F because I didn't follow directions when writing poems, as if standards define art, and there in institutionalized academia, I was told I'm not a good poet by a woman who only saw the format and the rules and the margins that were broken by each stroke of my pen, but didn't see me for who I am. And now, 11 years later, I'm on a stage with lights and a mic in the ears of hundreds or even thousands who came to listen to the F+ poet. If I had a chance to redo that poetry book for an A, I'd guzzle it in gasoline and light a match, because no amount of metaphor dressed in censorship and structure could convince me that my words aren't the strongest thing I have, that my voice isn't the sound of survival, that my heart isn't evident in every page that I write. To the last word, I will stand and speak until every student believes there are superpowers that lie within their voice box, waiting to save the world, that their story is a storm to be reckoned with, that their love and pain is worth writing about, and their words will leave legacies that will make them legendary, a reminder that I am far from failure. Thank you guys. Muchas gracias. Oh no, what happened?
Thank you so much, Mercedes. Loved that. And oh my gosh, just absolutely love that. Appreciate you for being able to share that, and really want folks to think about how that is connected to what we're going to talk about today, how that actually features some of the things that we're thinking about around the experiences of our young people and our communities in New Mexico. And now I'd like to turn it over to introductions, and I would love for that to start with our featured New Mexico speakers. Just quick introductions. Carla, I think you're first up.
Hi, my name is Carla Martinez. I am an educator from Taos, New Mexico. I've worked with the school system for over 17 years, I would say. And over the last few years, I've had the opportunity to learn quite a bit about education and reflect on how we can improve learning for our students and make them feel like they have a place and a home in our schools. So thank you for this opportunity to share our story with a larger audience and to continue work that was started way back in 2012. So I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Angelique?
Hello. Rio Grande training coordinator at Rocky Mountain Youth Corps here in Taos, New Mexico. I've been in this position for a little close to 7 years. I was a student of Carla Martinez, and so I'm very excited to be here to share y'all our experience, what resulted from that, and the continuation as well. So thank you very much, and I'm so very excited to be here in this space with you all.
Thank you, Angelique. Dr. Amy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm from Taos, New Mexico also, although I'm speaking to you right now from San Diego, beautiful soft air San Diego. Dr. Sonia and I have been here for the last week, although Sonia is now back in New Mexico, but we were here for 5 days for the American Educational Research Association meetings. But it's been really, really interesting. It's where the special interest group on social and emotional learning meets each year during these meetings. And so we've had the opportunity to have lots of rich conversation, particularly about what is labeled transformative social and emotional learning, the use of social and emotional capacities to authentically, humbly, honestly, courageously discuss issues of systemic racism and inequality and many of the issues that are raised in this seminar this webinar that we have together right now. I've had the pleasure of working with Carla Martinez for about at least the last 10 years, somewhat the last 12 years, and remember Angelique also from that time period, and have continued to work with them. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity to bring some of this work more forward for the whole state.
Thank you, Dr. Amy. Dr. Sonia?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sonia Saiz. I work for Las Cruces Public Schools. I coordinate mental health and academic counseling services. I'm a social worker by trade and have been in the social emotional wellness world since probably 1998, and I'm very honored to be here with everyone today.
Thank you, Dr. Sonia. Leslie?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Leslie Kelly, and I'm the Behavioral Health Coordinator for the New Mexico Public Education Department. And I'm just grateful for this partnership and all the local folks that were able to support this. One of the many things that I do has been around social emotional learning and pulling folks from around the state together to create and publish New Mexico's first social emotional learning framework, which is a lot of what this work is founded on. So I'm just really grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. And now just a quick run through of the transforming education folks that are here. Dr. Ward.
Hello, everyone. Excited to be here with you. I'm Dr. Angela Ward, Chief Program Officer for Transforming Ed.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Alicia Nance, and I am a senior partner here at Transforming Education and very grateful to be here with you all.
Hello again, everyone. Dr. Adrienne Kennedy here. I am a lead partner at Transforming Education.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Max Margolius. I am Director of Research and Learning at Transforming Ed, and really happy to be here with you all today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Isha Singhal. I'm the Senior Associate of Communications and Design at Transforming Education. And today I'm also your tech support, so please feel free to send me a chat message if you're having any tech difficulties.
So really quickly, we'd just like to go over what the components are for this partnership. you are experiencing one of the webinars. We also have a district network for social emotional learning, where we're working with different districts and supporting them, and learning sessions and technical assistance through this partnership with Transforming Education in New Mexico. And on the next slide, a little bit about Transforming Education. At Transforming Education, we commit to making space so that those whose voices are most impacted by structural oppression receive greater space, removing barriers, disrupting and dismantling barriers to students thriving, speaking up when we witness implicit or explicit bias in our work, and approaching our work with humility so that whole child development has a chance in this work that we do. And I'll pass it to the next person, to Leslie.
Hi, I just wanted to share, because this aligns really with all the work we're doing, that at the Public Education Department, our vision is that we're rooted in our strengths, and students in New Mexico are engaged in a culturally and linguistically responsive educational system that meets the social, emotional, and academic needs of all students.
Thank you, Leslie. And Dr. Kennedy, again, just want to quickly review the agenda for today. If you've been with us for the first two webinars, you kind of already know what the flow will be. It's set up using CASEL's 3 signature practices. So we started with our welcoming ritual. And now we're going to shift into our engaging strategies and meaning making. Then we'll follow that up with our next steps and our optimistic close. And just a reminder that you will receive the survey at the end. So we do ask that you take a few minutes and give us your feedback on how this session went. We really want to hear from you so that we can make this as meaningful for you as possible moving forward. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kennedy. Just wanted to go over it. When we hold space for folks and facilitate, we really want to make sure that we are engaging in a way that honors everyone, so that what we're saying and how we're actually behaving are in alignment. And one of the ways that we do that is with our agreements. So we have these 4 agreements to offer up to you all. I will give you all a second to review them on the screen. And so while this is the last of our webinars in this series, we want you to honor, right, that this is not closure on thinking about SEL work or the conversations that we are having. It is truly just a beginning, and we look forward to continuing to engage with you all. Feel free to take these agreements and use them in your own work as well. And our learning intentions. So we have 3 learning intentions for today. Most of them have been across our 3 webinars. The first one is we want to continue to co-create opportunities to deepen and develop your relationships and networks. We don't do this work in silos if we can help it. Even though institutions try to force us to do that, we know that this is relational work. This is work that takes a community. It takes relationships with each other and understanding each other. We also want to continue to explore promising practices that are aligned with both the New Mexico SEL framework that Leslie mentioned earlier and the New Mexico culturally and linguistically responsive framework. So we really want to highlight those 2. And the promising practice that we'll be talking about today is centered with Carla and Angelique in Taos. And we want to collaboratively discuss current problems of practice and potential solutions. So please, please, please lean into this. Think about your own work. What are barriers? What are things that you're thinking about? Because everyone on this call is here to co-create potential solutions with you. And now we will turn it over to our featured speakers who are hyperlocal to New Mexico. So, Dr. Sonia.
Okay, so as we get into our work today, when we met as a group to plan out what would be the goal, right, the intention of today's webinar, it was really to pair together the technical piece of our work, which is being in the framework and understanding how we're attending to each of the pieces of the framework as we are engaging in social emotional learning throughout our within our roles. So I'm referencing it. It is in your participant guide, and we will be doing a little work with it later on. What I also wanted to point out was that it can be challenging to identify the work that we're already doing and align it with the framework and then expand on it. And that was the reason for bringing Carla and Angelique in today, was to give a very beautiful example of how they've done this work. And so as you're listening to their story today, I invite you to think about your own social emotional learning journey, whether it be personal within your role as whatever system you're currently working with or population that you're working with, and just listen and be open to capture anything that might stand out for you. I also wanted to make a connection, next slide, please, to, we've had this definition of social emotional learning as it's been defined by CASEL, the Collaborative for Academics, Social and Emotional Learning framework and definition. And what they've done, not just recently, this has actually been since about 2019. So this has been some work that's been happening, but of course it's being highlighted in this time because of the very powerful conversations, and they're not just conversations. There's a lot of like violent acts happening around SEL. And I know that's a strong word, but I believe it's the accurate word as far as to describe how people are attacking not just this idea of social emotional learning, but linking it to things like critical race theory and culturally responsive teaching as these all being things that aren't good things for our children and even for ourselves. And that is by no means the case. It's false. And so the counter narrative that Dr. Alicia mentioned is what Carla and Angelique are here for, but it's also being supported by national organizations that really give us these foundational definitions. So transformative SEL is really just a reboot of the definition, and it's centered around affirming strengths, experiences, and identities of individuals, and really about co-creating what social emotional learning means for each of us. So with that, I just want to reference, I think I got a step ahead of myself, Dr. Alicia, and I mentioned earlier, as we go into the conversation, Dr. Amy and I really wanted it to be organic, and we've had some powerful things that have risen as we've had conversation with Carla and Angelique in some past when we've shared space in either other presentations or in the planning process. And that's what we're hoping to create again here for you all today. And so please be an active listener. And if there's something that comes up for you, a statement, a word, an aha moment, just in your own thinking around what they're sharing, please maybe jot it down somewhere or hold it, because we will come back to that once we conclude the conversation. And then I was hoping, because this is much more Dr. Amy and my style, if we could stop share so that we can see people, and we encourage you, but of course be comfortable, but we encourage you to turn your cameras on and just listen to how I need to stop talking. Let's listen to Carla and Angelique. And Dr. Amy, I'm going to let you get us started.
Thank you so much, Sonia. I'd like to invite us all to keep in the back of our minds this question: what is the job of an educator? And with that, I would like to invite Carla and Angelique. Are you okay if I call you by first name? Cool. Yeah, we usually do. So I wanted to check. This event, which is called the EQ Retreat, I think it's very important that we look at the origins of it, the genesis of it. How did it arise? So we're going to rewind back to the academic year of 2011 and 2012 in Taos. And I would like to ask the two people most intimately and immediately involved to describe what was happening. What was happening? And starting with Carla and then Angelique.
So that was the year that the district had actually begun working with Amy, and we were at the time calling social emotional learning EQ. And there had been a couple of trainings and conversations with the staff regarding emotional intelligence and how we can incorporate that into the school as a whole. And as the year progressed, my seniors who were in my anatomy and physiology class, I had them, most of them for multiple years or in multiple classes, started to have some major conflicts. And to the point where students were very uncomfortable with each other in the classroom. It was impacting their learning, and not just in my class, but in other classes as well. And a lot of this was focused and centered around identity, equity, a lot of the conversation pieces that we'll be talking about more today. And so realizing that this was a serious issue for my students, I reached out to Amy and asked if she would be willing to come into my class and work with me to kind of have conversations with the students regarding what the root of the problem was, and then also how do we come to some sort of resolution.
Why does it in the budget presentation
We worked
show that we have 7 schools?
We worked over several months to develop an environment of trust and collaboration. I think we had some very honest conversations regarding identity and equity in school. And I think that's what those were the two pieces of the conversation that were probably the hardest to have for the students. And it required a lot of vulnerability on their part. But in the end, I think they were able to feel more comfortable sharing, and then also do some really hard work and have some really hard conversations about those topics.
Thank you. Angelique, you were one of those seniors.
Yeah, totally. I think Carla summed it up really well. And we were at a point in our senior year, and for whatever reason, there were a lot of things that were preventing us as a class to be united in ways, for reasons we didn't really understand. I had gone to school with these individuals. I'd sat next to them for 12 years of my life, and for a lot of them, I didn't know anything about them, in a lot of different ways, right? And so we were trying to figure out, okay, why are we not getting along in a way? Why can't we progress as a united front? And they were really tough conversations, as a 17-year-old to have these conversations, but it was appreciated because nobody had ever given us the time to talk about these hard subjects, not once in those 12 years until Carla and Amy came in. And we're like, yeah, let's have the space, let's have a safe environment to talk about these things. And that way we can be a strong class. And how can we model this for the younger classes as they progress, so they don't have the same experience that we had, that they have an even better experience and a more powerful experience by talking through some of these tough things like equity and a lot of things and a lot of topics that tend to get masked in ways or can seem like a scary subject.
So the way I remember that, and this experience has been one of the highlights of my professional life, frankly and truthfully. I remember Carla saying, Amy, would you come into my anatomy and physiology class and let's talk about ethnicity, race, and culture. And I'm like, all right, we'll have to do a little research here to get it started. And I remember it was not just, I was drawn in immediately because it was not just like sort of an academic, let's describe these concepts, but rather I remember the first exercise that I remember that I think you had done before I actually came, you had it as like a homework assignment, if I'm correct, is to have people write on a piece of paper a time when they either had a benefit or a discrimination based on their perceived ethnicity. Is that right? Is that how you remember it, Carla?
Yeah, we had tried to, I was treading water with my students at the time. And so I had tried to do some work with them, and really the anger, and I will say there was a lot of anger in my classroom at the time, and it was in the school as a whole. It wasn't just something that lived in that space, was centered around those ideas. And those are really hard conversation pieces. We don't talk about them. We don't say, I feel discriminated against in a classroom because of my race, my gender, my ethnicity, whatever we feel we're being discriminated against for. We don't have those conversations with adults. And I say we as children because many of the adults, and I'll say myself, when I was going through school, I felt that, but did not have that conversation. I did not have the language, the tools to be able to speak about that. And I had conversations with some of my students who felt more comfortable sharing what was going on and knew there was a lot more work that needed to be done, that I didn't have the tools to do the work. And so that's really where the collaboration came into play with you, Amy.
Amy, I have a question.
Yes.
For Angelique. So I'm thinking about the question that Dr. Amy is having us ponder as we're listening, Angelique, and I'm curious to know, like, what was it about an anatomy and physiology teacher that it sounds like that you all sought her out specifically, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm curious to know what it was, like how you identified her as your person.
Yeah, that's a really good question. For myself personally, I had interacted with Carla multiple different ways, pretty much my whole experience through high school. She was our class sponsor. And so I was in student senate. And so I knew Carla in a lot of different ways. It just so happened that I was in anatomy and physiology. And I think what was really unique was we didn't have an option. She saw that this is what we needed. And she took the step and the initiative to have us have these conversations. And I really appreciate that she had us go through that experience. Because when I was sitting in that desk, like, I didn't really understand the impact of those conversations that we were going to have. And I think what made us comfortable was she really came from a reflective lens and worked really hard to make it a safe environment. So it wasn't like, okay, let's just talk about our feelings and you're going to talk and I'm not really going to listen, or there's not going to be like some kind of change behind it. It really was working with us almost that whole year to get us to that point where not only was she listening to us, but also had that reflective lens within herself, which I think was really powerful and important to start these conversations. So for me, I had already built that relationship with her. I knew that she was somebody that I could go to, regardless of whether it was asking questions in anatomy and physiology or anything else in the school. But it really was that safe environment, and it took work, to come in and say to 17-year-olds, all right, let's be vulnerable and let's talk about this. Like, it doesn't really work like that, or at least it didn't for me, right? It was building that up, building that framework, building those stepping stones so we could have those conversations, and really allowing us to know that, she was here. She wasn't gonna like take ownership over this. Like, it was ours to create and to really see where we could take these conversations, which I think is really important.
Absolutely. Carly, can I ask you, because from what Angelique shared, I just, she tagged it that this work is so challenging, right? It can feel really challenging. And I'm just curious to know, were there supports that you had going into this work? I mean, it feels very brave what you did, you decided to do, right? And who were your people aside from Amy, if anyone else?
Amy was definitely, I have to give a lot of credit to her and her patience and understanding and that calm presence that she brought to the classroom every single time we met, and her willingness to put in so much time and effort to have conversation with me outside of the classroom before she came in. I think that was really key for me to feel comfortable to have these hard conversations. And I also have to say that, there's my peers, there were teachers who were willing to have those hard conversations. It's a really difficult subject in an education setting because you don't make space for that. And as educators, we typically don't say, let's have a conversation about students feeling like they're discriminated in my class. Let's have a conversation about students feeling like they're discriminated against by their peers. And those were the conversations that we were having with the students in my anatomy and physiology class, because that was the heart of what was creating so much emotion. And we don't hold space for that in schools typically. And we don't have the training or the language to do that. And so really that was something that I had to lean on Amy for, and, my peers, but that was a very small group of individuals that I felt comfortable having that conversation with. It's really hard to build that level of trust with other educators, and that I didn't have that at the time. And so I sought that outside of that system.
I remember thinking it was very scary and very brave, and being asking the students to write down those stories, or like just write down one incident. And as I recall, we put them in a hat, and then everybody just drew one out and read aloud the random one they picked. And that was the start of the conversation that I was part of, at least. And I thought, that's just very courageous, and speaks to, I think, Angelique, what you're saying about some kind of trust already in Carla, that she wasn't going to either let this drop, or that I remember writing down that you once said that she cared enough about you to do this hard, uncomfortable work. And then by reading those little papers that were written by somebody else, that it made it pretty hard to run from this, to say, oh, no, this is just one person's problem, or this isn't really happening. It was a very courageous, a very active process. But I remember being scared and looking at you like, what is race, ethnicity? What are we talking about, Carla?
If I can share a little bit about that activity. When the students, I think having it anonymous was one of those ways to pull back from that that vulnerability that the students felt sharing these stories, because they were very honest and very raw stories about times that they had been profiled in public places or discriminated against and spoken very poorly to by their peers or by teachers. And so not having to read that on their own was a way to kind of protect the students and give them some space from that event. And it also, in turn, which I didn't expect, as Amy said, kind of made a connection between the person who read the story or read the incident and the story, because they were reading it. And even though it wasn't theirs, they didn't own it, they're the ones who shared it with the group. And that had some, I think some power over vulnerability, increasing that trust within the classroom, because now you're sharing somebody else's story. And I think there was a lot of respect for what was shared. And I think it changed some of the dynamics from that point forward to be more open to the conversation and open to the process.
Carla, I'm curious to know, like, aside from the students coming to you, and you obviously, and I don't want to make assumptions, but I'm just wondering, like, what were other indicators that you were gauging at that time that led you in this direction to do the work with your students, this work?
For that class in particular, and all my classes, I think I realized that whatever was going on with the students was preventing them from focusing in school. Like they were not learning. My class typically had a lot of group work. Students were collaborating, and so they weren't able to have those conversations. There was an outright refusal sometimes for different students to work with other students because they were completely uncomfortable with each other, and there was so much of this other stuff going on. And so that in and of itself was, you know, an indicator. And then just seeing the dynamics in the classroom, you know, high school kids are really good at showing how they feel about each other without saying it. So, you know, facial expressions, gestures, just the cold shoulder, you could feel it in the classroom. The environment was not a happy one. And it just, I could, in conversations with those students who I had I guess a closer relationship with, I knew that it wasn't just my classroom that this was happening in. It was happening in all of their classes, because it was a cohort of kids that shared multiple classes. So if that was happening in my class, it had to be happening in the other classes as well. And it just, it wasn't a good space for them to be.
Carla, I know that you have, I have two questions. I really appreciated, Angelique, how you said for reasons we did not understand, that this was, you know, going on for reasons we did not understand. And I'm thinking again about the role of a teacher. This seems like there's something in there to dig into, to look at those two. And Carla, I wanted to ask you also specifically about your own experience as a student that may have informed some of your decision making.
So I would say that I identified very closely with the experiences that Angelique shared and in her senior year and throughout her high school experience. I felt that I tiptoed through many of my classes as a student who was in an honors class, but did not have a voice, was not recognized the same way as my peers were. And I will share one story in particular. And this one's a hard one because I think this was one of those times when I really felt that I wasn't seen as a student. It was my junior year. It was the first year that the AP curriculum had been brought to Taos, and my biology teacher at the time, who is a great mentor to myself, and that's why I went into biology, asked a small group of us to go ahead and become part of a 0-hour AP biology class. So we met early in the morning, 6 o'clock, for months to prepare for the AP exam, in addition to the training that we did, or the learning that we did in our biology class. And throughout the year, we worked really hard, and I really enjoyed it. And I felt like this was probably one of the first times that one of my teachers recognized me for who I was and for what I could contribute, for what I knew, for my knowledge. And I loved that. But at the same time, in my English class, my English teacher seemed to have never heard me. It was one of those experiences where I would contribute to conversations and I just didn't seem to be part of the conversation. What I said wasn't valued. I didn't feel like my work was valued until my English teacher realized that I was in the AP biology cohort and pulled me aside one day and told me, I didn't realize that you were in that AP cohort. Surprised. He seemed very surprised that I was one of the students in that group. And that hurt because it felt like a judgment that I shouldn't have been there. But, and this is the part, I guess, that bothers me even more, is that from that point forward, I had a voice in that class. I was listened to. My work was valued in a different way. And that shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't happen to any of our students. And so that's the story that really comes to mind when I think about students struggling in a classroom and not having a voice and not being able to participate in their education the way that they should, because it's all there. They have it. We just need to listen to it and give them that opportunity to share their ideas and listen to them. So that's why I recognized and internalized what was happening in my classroom.
Thank you for sharing that story, Carla. I personally have a number as well. So that connection that you just made with me is, yes, valued of lived experiences. Thank you. So Angelique, it then leads me to wonder, from these really, hard conversations and the work that you and your classmates were involved in with Carla, what started to happen? What did you start to notice?
Yeah, I think thinking back on that experience, I think it allowed our class to really be empathetic. So kind of putting into place EQ or SEL, right? Because when we pulled stories out of the hat, we're all separate, we're all individual, but you're reading somebody else's story and you're like, wow, like there's so much more going on with each individual person that we don't know, and what their experience is, right? So we have so much that we're trying to navigate that we don't know, that we don't have the vocabulary to process what's going on, right? We have so much generational trauma. We don't understand why some of our voices are heard and others aren't. We don't know why some of us are being profiled and others aren't. There's all this generational trauma. And so from doing these exercises, from being vulnerable, we're really able to see each other in a different lens, in a more empathic lens. I know that one of the activities was to do a trust walk. And so you're partnered with somebody, one of you is blindfolded, and you have to trust the other person, and they're going to guide you through the halls of Taos High School. And so being a 17-year-old, that's really hard. That's putting you in a very vulnerable position, especially when it's somebody that, I don't know, maybe you've never had a conversation with, maybe you've judged them, maybe they've judged you. And now you're like kind of like putting like your life in their hands. And having to trust that they're gonna get you through that hallway. They're not gonna let you walk into a wall or to fall down the stairs. And so that really gave the opportunity to kind of open up, to break down some of these walls that we've already built around ourselves, to protect ourselves from various different things already that we have to face in everyday life. And so for me, after doing that experience with my partner, I was like, wow, I guess I can trust you. Like, let's have a conversation. Like, we would go out of Carla's class, walk down the hallways, and at least we would look at each other now. We would wave to each other on some instances. We might even talk to each other. Like, these were all things that we're slowly building throughout the year. I remember being invited to somebody's graduation party at the end of the year. And I was like, I never would have thought we would have gotten here if you were to ask me at the beginning of the year. And so we were able to see each other for where we were at, understand that some of us have different experiences, and let's have a conversation. Let's actually hear each other. Let's be human, and hear each other's shared experiences, and really utilize each other to be united in a lot of ways.
Angela, you said something else that I have noted over our conversations, and I was completely unprepared when you said this, and I'm not sure I even understand it. And I remember you said, well, yeah, as a senior about to graduate, you suddenly thought, there's a whole new world out there. And I don't know how that evolved out of what we're speaking about, but can you say anything more if you remember that?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, when we were having that conversation, at that point in my life, and I can only speak for myself, but I think some of my classmates shared similarly, you're showing up to school, you're doing the same thing, you have your routine. I'm just trying to focus on getting into class on time so Carla doesn't write me up and I have to go to detention or whatever, right? Like, you're in this routine. And then Carla's like, boom, let's talk about equity, race, all these other different things. And I'm like, whoa, I didn't know what these terms meant. I never had the opportunity for somebody to me like an individual, speaking to me like I'm being heard and valued. And so like, it was like that, like, you're in the, as a 17-year-old, you're going through the routine. It's like, what else do you have for me? I'm leaving in 3 months. I'm done. I'm graduating. What else do you have for me that can like open my eyes? And then like Carla and Amy were just like, boom, here you go. Let's talk about this. And so that was really empowering, because it felt for like a lot of my education experience, it's like, we don't talk about this. We don't really talk about it. We have these feelings. We don't understand why, right? As students going through this experience, I don't understand why in certain classes, I'm saying one thing and it's not being recognized, but my classmate who looks different, speaks maybe a little different, is being saying the same thing and they're acknowledged, right? When I'm saying something and it's not being heard for whatever reason, right? Whether I'm not fitting that mold, filling that mold, whether it's because I speak a little different and I have a Northern New Mexico accent, right? But maybe if I code switch, maybe then they're taking me a little bit more serious. And I'm like, why is that? When this is a part of my identity, and why isn't it being understood, right? So that's what kind of opened my eyes, was like, let's talk about this. And I didn't have the vocabulary, I didn't know the terms. And that's what really like opened my eyes, like that during my senior year, you're thinking, what else you got for me, teach, right? And then it's like, here you go. There's a whole different world. And let's offer a safe and supportive environment to talk about it, because that had never happened before, at least in my experience.
It's what and how has it impacted your work? That let's move to the present. How's it impacted your current world? And Carla, how are you seeing these experiences and this thread showing up in what you're choosing to do now?
It's still there, I appreciate that I have the foundation to understand what's happening, because I haven't changed. My identity is still the same. I'm still Hispanic, brown, female, going through the world of this experience together on Earth. And there are times where I'm still discriminated against. I find that there's still times that I have to code switch for me to feel like I'm being heard. But it's giving me an understanding to know what's going on, and an empowerment to kind of step to these systems and institutions and be like, no, like, I am part of my identity and I'm not going to code switch and I'm still going to be heard. But it also gives me the emotional awareness to kind of see where other people are coming from and to understand, okay, how can we come together? How can I continue to be vulnerable and allow for what happened 10 years ago in that classroom to continue to still happen in everyday life? Because that was really empowering. And, you know, understanding these topics and what we're going through, it didn't just stop there. It's continued. It's been every day that I'm going through that experience. But it's made a huge impact on my life. And I think within my profession and the degrees I've gone for and everything I've studied, it's really had an impact in how within my current work, I'm looking at positive youth development and social and emotional learning, and it's not gone anywhere. It's still present, and it's still very important. So it's just what happened 10 years ago just really set path for where I'm at today and building those foundations. So the building's not done, but the foundation had been set in a way.
Thank you. I love watching the ripples of how it's rippled. It's carried with you and rippled.
So there's another ripple to this that I'm going to share real quickly. I've been blessed with Angelique sharing what she's learned with my own daughters. And so in her role, in her position, both my girls have worked under her and have benefited from her intuition, her understanding, and her knowledge. And so I am greatly appreciative of how that has cycled and now those ripples continue. So I just felt it was important to share that. My work and what I do now, I'm no longer in the classroom. I'm an instructional coach, but I still find that thread of identity and who I am as an important piece for education. And so I'm lucky enough that some of the work that I've been doing under federal programs in Taos is with culturally and linguistically responsive instruction. And so we've been able to share that connection between SEL and CLR in Taos. And the work that we've been doing has really, I think, as a teacher, I'm just going to say we have so many initiatives coming at us and we see all of them as new and different. And it's really hard for us to hold space for all of those in our mind and in our classrooms. But when we take a step back and we look at what all of these things really are looking at, it's improving educational outcomes for our students and creating an environment that they feel like they can learn in. And that's what SEL is. That's really why we talk about it in the schools, is because we want our students to feel like this is a safe place, to know who they are, to know who they are within their community and their state and their world, and be able to have a voice. And that's SEL, but that's also culturally and linguistically responsive instruction. The two are the same. And I'm lucky enough to see the connection and be able to hopefully share that connection with other teachers in the work that I've been doing, because that's how we as teachers create that space for our students. It's knowing who we are first. And I think those are the harder conversations. In my experience, I've had easier conversations with students about equity and identity and ethnicity and race and those pieces than I have with adults. And I think those conversations need to happen because we are the ones who create that environment. We control it. We come into the classroom with our own perspectives based on our lived experiences, and they're all unique. So when we walk into a classroom, if we're not aware of who we are, how can we create a space that's safe and allows for vulnerability for our students? And I think that's one of those first steps that we need to take is adults being able to be reflective. And that was hard for me. I will tell you some of the things that I heard and I continue to hear from current students, past students. Those are hard things to hear sometimes because often they're unintended behaviors that I've exhibited, unintended words that are taken in a way that I didn't mean. But if I'm not willing to stop and say, your interpretation and your understanding of my behavior and my words is valid, and I honor that and I respect that, and how can we move forward from that, my students are going to continue to feel like they don't belong in my classroom if I don't do that as an adult. And it's hard because we get defensive and we start to justify and explain and all of the things that we do when we feel uncomfortable. And I think that's one of those first pieces that we need to hold space for in schools, is for the adults to have those conversations. So SEL EQ, it continues today. This last week, we just finished the 11th year of the EQ retreat, so it has continued. I will say that the seniors, when they were wrapping up the work with Amy and myself, said, we should have learned this before. And Amy asked the question, what do you mean before, in the school year? And they said, no, when we were freshmen. So they really wanted to have the opportunity to have these conversations, or at least begin the work when they were freshmen. And so they were the ones who really pushed to have a 3-day retreat. And it was in collaboration with our English department that we were able to get that to happen. But it's been going on for the last 10 years. Our students took charge of coming up with our team building activities. They took charge of the schedule. They were senior mentors. They shared stories with the freshmen about their own experiences that brought hope to their experience. So yes, they were challenges, but then how did I overcome those challenges? Trying to have students think about resiliency and perseverance and all those qualities and characteristics we want our high school students to have. That was what was shared by our seniors, and they were powerful stories. And I think there was a lot of tears shed, but that continues today. It's changed a bit, but that's the work that Angelique and her friends began. And that's the work that I'm so proud of them that they continue in their lives today.
Carla, thank you so much for one. I'm going to just go back, tapping into the adult piece, right? And the continued learning and really paying attention to our own social emotional well-being, right? And I really, the way that I see it is that when we're being very intentional about self-awareness, social awareness, all of that, right? And then we wind up, it equals an emotionally intelligent individual. And then to hear about the profound impact that this has had from 2012, that was transformative SEL going on at that time. It was really about being student-led, honoring the ways that they knew how to just be who they were and build on their learning from that. Let's my heart is so full right now. So thank you and Angelique. I am watching time, and I want to give participants, if they have any questions for you all, and then to send people. We'll probably shorten the breakout room time a little bit, but that's okay. This was totally worth it, and I want to have some time also for our optimistic closing. But right now, if anyone has any questions before you go into the breakout rooms for Carla or Angelique. And Dr. Alicia, I see you're unmuted. Did you want to add anything?
Nope, that's fine. We'll just switch the Q&A with the breakout rooms. That's not a problem.
Perfect. Yes, let's do that. Let's do that. So I was writing down furiously, but I want to give you all an opportunity if anyone had an aha moment, something that they want to respond to, ask a follow-up question about, and consider the framework, right? Like if you look at it, it's about positive development, mental relationships, and intentional development of skills, mindsets, and habits. It's rich instructional experiences. It's environments filled with safety and belonging, integrated systems of support, and then of course the dreaded data piece, but I heard that in there as well. And I'm just curious to know what you all are thinking or pondering about how this fits, like where were the pieces of the story that stood out to you most, and how might you even relate that to the framework?
I don't see, sorry, I don't see here where I should raise my hand. But anyway, my name is Nancy Yanes, and I'm living in an old house and it's very dark and I didn't feel comfortable. I ended here because when I moved to this small village, they broke into my, well, they wiped my belongings. So I didn't want to leave before the contract, and I ended in this place, very cold, but anyway, I'm here. And I just wanted to mention, I studied in this country. I'm from Mexico, and I did my university here. And I mean, I did 2 years in my country, and then I did here, my first degree, well, my second is anthropology, and the other communication. And I would like to share my experience. I have a heavy accent, and one part is, I think, has to do with an audio deficit. Not the ear hears well, but the seems that I like opera. I can hear the music. I mean, and I can appreciate it. I cannot reproduce. So this deficit has caused me a lot of problem because it sounds cacophonic, and I have hurt myself. And that has caused me a lot of problems because in the way I speak. I also, another factor is that when I came to this country, I spoke English as bad as I do now, so my accent was fossilized. But while I was very interesting, while I was studying when I was studying in anthropology, communication, especially anthropology. And I did also some art in theater, and that was okay. There was, the population was more open. When I went to communication, still, less cool, I could say. My classmates were less cool, but less cosmic in the way I saw it, but they were okay. But when I went, because I was an anthropologist and I did not have a job, it was very difficult. And I realized that if I got my PhD, I will have to wait for somebody to die, in the Department of Anthropology for me to try to put an application. So I ended being a teacher. When I went to study education, I saw a lot of prejudice. And I saw the population was little bit, in my experience, more narrow-minded, less open. And perhaps one factor is that these teachers, because many of them were already teachers, I just got my teaching certificate. Many of these were teachers, and somehow their view seems to be more narrow. And it was a discrimination. I felt a lot of discrimination. So it was not only as a student, as a teacher. And paradoxically, and I want to share with you this, and then I will be quiet, but it was no in the areas that were more Anglos. I was in New York. It's very cosmopolite. I mean, all the world is in New York. And then also in Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia. When I came to New Mexico, which I thought it was more related to me, right? I found the opposite. It was the contradiction that there was more discrimination. When I started working in schools that were highly Hispanic, there was a lot of discrimination against people who were from Latin America. And there was, to the point that in one school, they didn't greet us. They did not respond. So this is the people who are teaching. you know, and they might know a lot about patito, pollito, I mean, little chicken and all whatever takes, you know, the level that they are teaching, but so unaware. And to a point that I said, well, okay, let me see. They don't answer my greeting. They ignore me, but I realized, okay, this maybe is fair because I saw them, I realized I see them as unsophisticated. I don't see them polished. So in some way, I'm also being prejudiced. I'm looking them less than me and they see me less than them. So maybe that's even, and I just keep my, you know, my mouth quiet.
Thank you, Nancy, for sharing your story. And I was recognizing so many points that are connected to, you know, what Carla and Angelique shared with us. And I'm just curious to know, and then we'll take maybe one or two more questions or comments that the whole group might have. But where are you currently working right now? What's your position and where do you work?
Well, I'm in a town that is kind of ghost town. It has a story. It was at one time the capital of the Pinto Bean, but now it's Montaner, New Mexico.
Okay.
I'm a hiker. I like climbing. I like hiking, camping. So when they called me, I thought was Montaner, but it's Montaner. And I checked, but the houses are falling apart. Unfortunately, this is the discrimination against a community, Hispanic community, mainly because it's, you know, there are other ethnicities,
Right.
mainly Anglos, Hispanics, a few Afro-Americans, but it has been forgotten. The houses are falling apart, broken windows, without doors, because they are heavily vandalized. So the crime here is very, very bad. They told me that as soon as a person died, the person just died, they broke into the housing.
Thank you for bringing to light the discrimination against the very rural areas in our state, Nancy, and thank you for your contribution today. We greatly appreciate it. Would anyone else? We have a few more minutes for some whole group discussion. And you can just please feel free. I've gone from gallery to speaker, but now if you can either do this, now I can see everyone again, or if you just want to unmute.
I think Lillian.
A few words. This started in about 2012, and I came in about 2013. So I am starting my 9th year here in this district, and all of the years that I've been here, I've been amazed at the staff that we have, the instructional coaches, the community members, the nonprofit organizations. We have all worked together, including UNM Taos and Dr. Franklin, to provide as much health and wellness to our students, which includes SEL. And we've done this EQ retreat. It seems to have been getting better and better. It is really incredible right now. In fact, some of the students before the pandemic, so we're hoping to get to do this again. They do go to the middle school and they do groups there, and they work really hard with. They're very serious, the students, when they go and work with our middle school students. So that has expanded a little bit, and we're hoping to continue that. We've also hired an SEL coordinator this year, and the Mark Richard is working with all of the principals and the schools on SEL district-wide. And so little by little, we have expanded, and we're still working on our 10-year SEL strategic goal. We started last year, and one of the partners that we've been working with is Dallas Public Schools. And I don't know if you're familiar with, they have about 18 SEL coordinators, of course, 200,000 students, but each coordinator has about 12 schools that they work with full time. And we have a team right now that left on Sunday to Dallas to just take a look at some of the highlights of what is working well for them, what they have done that they've seen what success they've seen from the students. And so it's really, really been important for us to partner, to reach out, to learn what we can learn from others. And Dr. Franklin has been very instrumental with her expertise to be involved in so many areas of really all grade levels, and being here in Taos, we're really fortunate to have her here. And we really believe in SEL. We want to do the best we can for every student and staff member. And we have worked really hard to do that. And I think we really have that EQ down, and we're constantly trying to improve and think of new and better ways. But it's been amazing to see the EQ retreat and the nonprofit organizations, the community members who volunteer to help with the EQ, and just participating in some of the EQ classes with the students. It is amazing how transparent students, even with the superintendent in a room with them, they are so true to themselves. They're just so willing to talk about how they feel and the trials and tribulations and challenges that they've had. And it really changes children. It really changes, I believe it changes these students for the better. And it is so powerful that it's just been amazing. And, you know, Yale University gave us some funding a few years ago. And so we took a team over there to Yale also. And we continue to do our best to provide the best SEL that we can. And we're going to continue to do that. And, you know,
no, Lily, and I'm sorry, I would because I want your ear, and I'm going to be reaching out to you. It's the testimonial that happened here today is just backing everything that you're saying, and we're so grateful because it does start from the top down. And thank you so much. I know we have a very important optimistic closing as well. So I'm going to hand it back over to Dr. Alicia. Thank you for being here, Lillian.
No worries. Thank you so much. It's so important, I think, to hear you all being able to hear someplace in the state where there are folks that have that hyperlocal context to be able to pull from and share and generalize promising practices. So I'm really just going to shift this to talk about other opportunities for you all to dig in with SEL for New Mexico and other organizations and opportunities. So next slide, Dr. Kennedy. We will be offering district network office hours. So during the month of May, well, as you all are wrapping up the school year, thinking about plans for the next school year, thinking about ways to send young people and your school community off for the summer, we will be offering opportunities for you to drop in. They will be scheduled. And so we'll send out a menu of all the dates in May for you all to be able to drop in as you all see fit and have space and time in your calendars to continue to network. So that's an opportunity from Transforming Education with our partnership with New Mexico PED. We'll also be sending out webinar recordings of this webinar, just like we did the other ones. And you can also find them on Transforming Education's YouTube channel. And now, if there are any other opportunities from Leslie or SEL from New Mexico, would love for you all to share before we turn it over to Mercedes.
Just wanted to add that there's going to be one more Project Echo, UNM Echo SEL series on May 3rd. And those occur at from 3:30 to 4:30. And the last one, and I'm not going to say that title correctly, but it's SEL and community and working with communities. So if you're interested, you can email me or just go to UNM Project Echo for SEL, and you'll see the link there where you can sign up to get the link to the actual webinar.
Awesome, thank you so much. So what I'd like to do is shift to our optimistic close, and I'm going to bring Mercedes Holtry back for another spoken word. Mercedes?
Awesome. Thank you all for, again, including me in your opening and your closing of this webinar. I've learned so much sitting in and listening to the testimony. Thank you, Carla and Angelique, for sharing, your story. I connect with it a lot because, at my first poem, like I said, I do poetry for a living. It's my career, and if I had let my English teacher, who now, as an adult, I see was very much prejudiced against the Hispanic students in her class. It was an AP's honor class, and so me writing my entire story, about my Mexican heritage and upbringing in this poetry book in the form of poetry, and then to receive an F was so discouraging, especially because it wasn't based on the poetry, right? It wasn't like this is an F, poetry, art is subjective, right? You can't really grade it. So she didn't even take the chance to read the book. She solely gave me the grade based off the fact that, the margins on the paper were not the correct margins, and, the title wasn't centered, and really all these excuses to not give me the grade I deserved, because the poetry wasn't something that she found to be poetry, right? It wasn't Edgar Allan Poe or Shakespeare or Robert Frost or any of, the poets that don't represent who I am, right? And so to know that there's teachers out there that are actually making a difference and talking about, race and ethnicity and placement and how we all navigate the world and the identities that we're in, I think is really super important. So thank you again for sharing those stories. I'm gonna be reading a poem, and I was actually gonna read this other poem, but I was kind of really inspired by the conversations happening in the webinar that I wanted to read a poem that is not published yet. And I think it's fitting because with critical race theory, right, or with SEL learning, with anything that involves us learning about the truth of our past, and it is a violent past, right? That is an accurate word to use. It is a violent past, and I think to write about it is I've heard students write about it, and it's really emotional for them. It's really emotional for myself. And so when this poem came out, I think it was right after the incident where a student's hair was cut off at Cibola High School, and that student was Native American. And also, I think it was around the time of, I don't even remember which trial, that's kind of like the point, right? Which trial was happening in America at the time for police brutality. But I know it was one of the trials, and I was really upset. And so this is kind of the poem that came out of that. So this poem is called America the Free. They say America is a dream for some and a nightmare for others, and some think, could that really be true? They say the land of the free and the home of the brave, and that star-spangled flag waves red, white, and blue. It waves freedom, ironically, in the places where people ain't free, like the cages at the borders and the private prisons and the public school systems, where only a small percentage of us go on to get that college degree. Because that's the ticket, they say, to a life with the white picket fence and a home that feels real. So we spend thousands in debt for a piece of paper that says we beat the system that was built for us to fail. I think about those student loans often, like one day I'll get the dream job that pays those off, and then I'll finally be free. Free to live a life my ancestors only dreamed of, a life they never got to see. America the free. And it makes me think education is a dream for others and a rite of passage for the upper class. Why you think politicians prey on the poor, like, look at the life you could have. Meanwhile, they defund our schools and give policemen all the city and state funds, and all the while we stay seeing Black and brown kids die from the barrel of a cop's gun. So we yell in the streets because the First Amendment says it's our right to speak what we believe, to keep fighting this American fight. But if it's our American right, why do they send cops in full riot gear to tear gas us and blast us through the night? Then the media says, look at all these poor people destroying our cities. Look at them set buildings on fire. Look at them pillage, like we ain't a nation built on violence, like white people didn't come here and destroy entire villages. And when they say, why don't you just go back to your country or where you came from, I get so gassed up. My ancestors have been here many moons, generations of working until the sun comes up. I don't know how many times I have to tell y'all we didn't cross the border crossed us. The real alien is the conquistador with his horses and his guns and his dreams of new nations, killed off full nations of Native Americans with smallpox blankets, stepped foot on this land and caused nothing but havoc, put them in boarding schools to wash out the savage, gave them reservations with no resources to survive, and still taking advantage of the land by building destructive pipelines, poisoning the water that then makes the people sick, and then charging up the ass to being seen by a doctor to get your body fixed. No health insurance means shorter lives to live. So I get Medicaid and suddenly I'm the welfare queen, eating up all your hard-earned tax. Rich white people love pointing fingers like they're the ones collecting the most checks. Check the facts. But it's immigrants destroying this country. No, it's Muslim terrorists. No, it's blacks. Blaming everybody as if your ancestors built this country off their backs when they actually sat around barking orders with their whips and their chains saying, we escaped the Queen of England, now it's our turn to cause pain. And they wonder why I don't celebrate 4th of July because I'm tired of this fake ass patriotism being blown up in the sky. We're not free unless we're white and we're male, because that's who the Constitution protects. Our founding fathers owned slaves and somehow our history books forget. So our kids glorify this narrative like we're the greatest country alive because we can carry guns and order Big Macs and fries. In America, we supersize, we televise, we tell all the lies. I'm sick of wanting to love my country when all it does is reject the people I love, puts us against each other using politics and such. I could care less about being blue or red, right or left, Republican or Dem. They both profit when their votes are in their pockets and our livelihoods in their hands. I worry for our children because no one's really paving a way. We live in a system where you either survive or succeed based off the color of your skin, where you live, and your last name. Ain't it a shame? America the free. When will we let freedom ring? We're always conveniently quoting Dr. King, but never really knowing Dr. King and the message that he stood for, not just the speech, I have a dream. Always fought chaos with peace and still got gunned down by a racist in Memphis, Tennessee, and y'all have the nerve to tell me America's come a long way. I say there's a lot of fighting left to do. You're either coming or you stay. To be clear, I love all people, from the darkest to the lightest. My problem is white supremacy owns the table that runs the nation, and we ain't all invited. Y'all may not own slaves today, but you still incite these race riots. You sit at the top, just like your ancestors intended, complicit in a system that benefits you as long as it's divided. America the free, so imprisoned and upheld by the doctrines in 1787 that our white forefathers wrote, but quick to say, well, slavery in 1808 was such a long time ago. America the forgetful, America the regretful, America home of the brave. Yes, we are brave because even when America doesn't claim us, we stay and we rage and we fight and we pray for a nation that's supposedly under God for change, but God only helps those who help themselves. And right now we have so much to figure out. Cycles to keep the rich rich and the poor need to break. Our planet is at stake. Our education is fake. Racism is still causing funerals and wakes. I think most of us just want to make it through today. America, when you look in the mirror, what do you see? I wish you were built for everyone. Maybe then we could call ourselves a country that's free. Yeah, imagine that, a flag that all people, all races, all creeds can feel flowing in the breeze. Maybe that's why they call you a dream. America, the free. Cool, thank you so much.
Mercedes.
Thank you so much, very, very much, Mercedes, and everyone who joined us today. Carla, Angelique, everyone who joined. Thank you so much. Gratitude. What a way to wrap up our SEL webinar series with a serious mic drop and all of the wonderful counter narratives and proving what is possible and showing the ripples. Thank you so much. Gratitude to SEL for New Mexico, Dr. Amy, Dr. Sonia, Leslie, New Mexico PED, and to you all who are doing the work. Thank you, so powerful, so grateful. And with that, we are done.